Hello there, and welcome to this section of the Capital's presentation series, where we're going to be talking about Ontario's undersupply condo markets with a focus on downtown Kingston. A bit about myself: my name is Randy McDonald. I'm the president of Heresy Condo Marketing. We're specialists in investor-focused condo email marketing solutions. We've been involved in over 40 pre-construction condo projects in Southern Ontario since 2008. We've published over 900 real estate articles online since 2009. Website's heresyemail.com. A bit about Kingston's Capital's Condos developer, Innate Developments. They are a condo and townhome specialist with 20 years experience developing in undersupplied areas outside the Greater Toronto Area, including Waterloo and downtown Kingston. There is the future Capitol building in downtown Kingston, Ontario. Okay, so there's 5 sections overall to the presentation for the Capitol, 5 separate videos really. The first is on maximizing condo investment profitability. This is a good general condo due diligence video applicable to assessing any condo investment opportunity. Second is Ontario's undersupplied condo markets. Part 1 is on Waterloo. Part 2, what you're watching now, is on downtown Kingston. Both are locations that Innate Developments has developed in. Third is Ontario's best and worst condo market. So again, this is general condo due diligence and best practices for any projects you're considering. Fourth section is financial analysis for the Capital condos. And fifth, accelerate your condo portfolio's growth with refinancing. Again, a general video for condo investing. So let's dive in and talk about downtown Kingston and how it's an undersupplied condo market. So this is just an excerpt from the Maximizing Condo Investing Profitability video. So there's 4 key ingredients for buying right with investment property for minimizing your loss and maximizing your long-term return on investment. You know, there's an old saying in real estate that you don't make money when you sell real estate, you make money when you buy, okay? And the reason is that there's a few key ingredients to buying right. It's easy to buy the wrong property and not do as well as you could as buying the right property. So there's 4 key ingredients there. You can see them there. I'm only going to deal right now with the what it means to be buying an emerging property market. Okay, so to understand what emerging property market is, you need to understand that there's 4 phases of all real estate markets. Okay, 4 phases that they all go through in their evolution, and you can define a market by city or by neighborhood. Okay, so the first phase is the early market. An early market will transition into an emerging market. Emerging market will transition into an established market, and an established market will transition into a mature market. Okay, so where you want to be is buying in an emerging market. If you were to rate them out of 10, 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being the best, emerging market ranks the best at an 8 to 10 out of 10. And so here is some more information on how these markets work. So it's very important to understand which of these 4 phases a given neighborhood or areas within the city in today. It has a huge influence on a new condos and long-term profitability. So by watching these videos, you'll be able to look at any given property and understand which of the 4 phases it's in, and the area is in, and therefore whether you should consider it as an investment or rule it out. Okay, so savvy investors carefully look for and buy in emerging property markets, the most profitable markets. And so what I mean by emerging is it's a neighborhood or area moving from relative obscurity, being an early market, to surging demand for local properties, emerging market. So in a nutshell, an early market is off the radar. Okay, it's not, and no one's looking at it, and whereas an emerging market is where investors are starting to look at it. Okay, it's on the radar of some investors. Okay, so that's the key difference between these 2 phases. So emerging property markets are imbalanced supply and demand markets with clear, measurable proof that current property demand is much greater than current property supply for at least one type of property, typically condos. Okay, so emerging property markets will gradually become established property markets in the coming years, becoming more balanced as property supply grows toward meeting property demand with new condo projects started. Okay, so there's less profit for investors with established markets than emerging markets. Another way of thinking of established property market is mainstream. It's when it's well known, it's out there, and this area is commonly invested in. Okay. So as established property markets become more and more supplied through time, they become mature property markets in the coming years, once again becoming imbalanced as property supply grows beyond property demand. Okay, so it's the reverse of the emerging market, exactly opposite. So with mature markets, investor profits decrease and are even less than established markets. So again, one word description would be saturated. If you take a look at at a mature market, it's often where you see a ton of condos concentrated in a particular area, and they're all high rises. Okay, so that's a telltale sign that an area is a saturated market, and you want to avoid these markets. So properly timing your condo investments for buying in emerging property markets before they become established or mature markets is very important for maximizing your long-term return on investment. Okay, so to really make this simple, here's the rule of thumb for buying right and therefore buying an emerging market. Okay, the earlier you buy, the less you pay, the more you get, and the more you'll likely earn long term. Okay, so that's really the whole thing condensed. So if you want more information on the 4 phases of real estate markets, check out the Maximizing Condo Investment Profitability, where I go into detail, where I describe different neighborhoods, different cities, and different places to illustrate each of the 4 phases so that you understand clearly. And so you can use this as a tool in your due diligence process and looking at various properties now and in the future so that you know where phase is the property in, should I buy it, shouldn't I buy it. So Nate Developments has a rock solid track record of identifying and developing in emerging markets, highly undersupplied and highly demanded Ontario condo markets. The result, better returns for Nate's investors than other condo developers. Another thing to remember is that all developers are selling in all 4 phases, okay, of each market phase. It's really up to the investor to determine which of the phases it is. They're typically not going to know, and especially if they're in a mature market phase, they're not going to want you to know that. They're not going to want you to know that it's saturated and that it's diminishing returns and so forth. So it's up to the investor to be smart, and this is where working with an agent, like if you're looking and investing in a certain neighborhood, it's good to work with a real estate agent for sure that knows the neighborhood really well, that has a long-term vision, from the past, knows what they're doing, and can help you with this. So a prime example of an emerging market that Nate Developments has been developed in is the Waterloo student housing market. And so just to give you a really brief recap of this, is that starting in fall 2012, when new 1 and 2 bedroom condos comprised only a very tiny 0.03% of the Waterloo student housing market, Nate Developments built new Condo condos in Waterloo. And in just a year and a half, Nate 100% sold out all 5 condo buildings of Sage, plus all 3 townhouse buildings of Ivy Towns, totaling 805 units, okay, which is really quite something when you're looking at an area outside the Toronto area. So anyways, and also to put the icing on the cake, in 2015, Nate fulfilled tenant lease guarantees on all 805 units sold, providing all tenants at the guaranteed monthly rates with 0 vacancies. This is one of the key things that Nate did that I had never seen any other developer do in the other projects I worked on in Toronto, where they had offered a truly turnkey investment. They'd offered a guaranteed tenant, full furnishings, and and that was really something that differentiated themselves. And so they followed through 3 years later and actually delivered on everything that they promised. And it's something that they're also offering in downtown Kingston with the Capital as well. So that's why this analysis is intended to show you that the Capital is the next stage condo. So after all Waterloo's Sage and Ivy Towns phases fully sold out, Nate Developments next decided to develop in another completely different emerging market, also located in a small city not far from the GTA. Okay, so this is why Nate Developments is a specialist in emerging markets. So Nate chose downtown Kingston because in terms of condo supply and demand, today's downtown Kingston condo market is very similar to Waterloo's student condo market in 2012. So you're going to see why that is in the rest of this presentation, and especially if you can compare it to the Waterloo, the Waterloo presentation that's also available, and you'll see the similarities between the 2 markets. Waterloo back in 2012 and downtown Kingston today in 2016. So as with Waterloo 2012, Innate has rock-solid data proving downtown Kingston's condo market today is also highly undersupplied relative to the high demand. And again, the capital is the next stage, condos. And so here's why. Okay, so let's take a look at downtown Kingston's condo market supply. All right, so there's really a twofold market undersupply status for downtown Kingston. Okay, keep in mind that there are currently no high-rise condo buildings, zero high-rise condo buildings in the downtown Kingston market. Okay, so there is a twofold market undersupply. There is both a lack of student condos and a lack of condos for the general public, whereas in Waterloo, being a university town, there's only one factor driving undersupply back in 2012, that is, and that was the lack of student condos. Okay, so this is fairly significant, and we're going to see what exactly that means in terms of student demographic and the general demographic public as we go along, because the capital is for all types of people, not just students, as with Innate's Waterloo project. So so let's talk about the student demographic for the capital. So downtown Kingston has a lack of student condos. There's no high-rise condo buildings in the downtown area, and this is where Queen's University is located. So Kingston's Queen University only supplies 3,900 beds on campus, yet has 25,000 students total. So that means only 16% of the students live on campus. Therefore, 84% or 20,000 plus must live off campus. Okay, so and another thing to consider is that 95% of Queen's students are not from Kingston and therefore need accommodations. So that's the highest percentage in Canada for all universities, and therefore that means 19,000 students from Queen's require off-campus housing. 85% of Queen's students live within a 15-minute walk to the campus, according to the university. So that means the capital is prime because it's very near Queen's, a 10-minute walk away. So it's definitely, the students are a great market for the Capitol building. Another big factor that's very appealing to students, not only the proximity to Queen's, is also its walk score. The Capitol has a near perfect 98 of 100 walk score, making it very appealing to students, Queen's students, most of whom do not have cars. So just so you understand what walk score is a site that you take any address, street address in North America, and you plug it in, and it gives you a rating between 1 and 100 of how walkable an area is in terms of the amenities in its area and the proximity of those amenities to the address. And it's like a credit rating, gives you a score out of 100. So the Capitol has a 98 out of 100. There are plenty of places in downtown Toronto that don't have a 98 out of 100 walk score, okay, in terms of its amenities. So here's just to put a visual on that. Right in the center there, that blue dot you see here where I'm putting my cursor, that is the location of the Capitol on Princess Street, downtown Kingston. And all of those little icons around are all the different things that are amenity-wise that are available in the area and the proximity of them to it. So definitely it's got the location happening. The other thing that makes the student condos very appealing is the Capitol's full furnishing package. So Innate Developments provides for all condos are perfect for Queen's students temporarily living away from home, and it gets investors higher rents than unfurnished units. You got to understand that 95% of the students are not going to school and living at home with mom and dad. They're at Queen's, and so they need somewhere to live, and they need furnishings as well, because they're typically going back home there in the summer, and then once they finish their schooling, then they just move back home, pay off their student loan. That's what I did for the first 2 or 3 years, and then move out. Okay, so they don't have the furnishings, and so they need it. So this gets investors higher rents than unfurnished units, and so this is another bonus for why the Capitol is great for Queen's students. So the other factor is the lack of condos for the general public. So again, there are currently no high-rise condo buildings in downtown Kingston. The Capitol will be the very first, and there, as a result, is what you see. The view will be of the Capitol building once it's finished in 2018. Great view of the Kingston Harbor and the entire region. Another benefit of being a first high-rise in the area. So, the 2016 downtown Kingston is very similar to Waterloo in 2011. So in 2011, before Innate Developments developed in Waterloo, of the rental property, Of the rental property management company Domus Student Housings, 3,000 beds, only 0.03% were new 1 to 2 bedroom student condos. I kind of word that a little bit clunky, but this just gives you an indication that back in 2011, this was the how few the student condos were. Only 0.03% of the buildings that were in the area under management by this company were new 1 to 2 bedroom student condos. Okay, so you can see that this is analogous to being a 0.3% the vacancy rate according to CMHC in downtown Kingston. We'll get into that more later. So let's take a look at the other buildings in downtown Kingston to show you the opportunity and why this is an emerging market. So existing comparable upscale low to mid-rise condos in downtown Kingston include the Royal George, Harbour Place, and Admiralty Place, and they're mostly very large units for 600,000 to over $1 million. You know, so this is one of the things about early markets is that, and it's like this in one of the other videos I talk about, where the Toronto West Waterfront and the Palace Pier building, it's absolutely in prime location where it is, because it was the first. It was the most land, it was the best located land, and the same thing here. You know, the buildings that were preceded the Capitol, there was lots of land, and they're right on the water, okay? And so they were able to make them big, and that's why they're so expensive, okay? And the Palace Pier is very much like that in Toronto West. So considering these units are 600,000 over $1 million, the Capitol definitely fills Kingston's huge condo market gap. Its units started only at $239,900, so that's 50 to 150,000 less than Toronto. Okay. So now here's another factor that's really affecting heavily the condo market supply in downtown Kingston. So the historical building situation. So this is a long-term barrier to entry for new condos, and it really restricts the supply of buildings. It has for years and will continue to, the historical building situation, and I'll explain why. So much of downtown Kingston cannot be developed for condos, and a very important factor contributing heavily to downtown Kingston's undersupply condo market are the very large number of protected historical buildings present. So just to give you a bit of a history, Kingston is one of Ontario's, perhaps Canada's oldest cities. It was established in 1683. It's one of the original colonies of Ontario, and it's nearly 350 years old. And Kingston is actually nicknamed the Limestone City because of the many heritage buildings constructed using the abundant limestone in the Kingston area that's been quarried. And so here's an example of that. This is Kingston City Hall, and it was built in 1841 from limestone. Beautiful building. And obviously buildings like this that are not only great, you know, kind of rare materials, but also beautifully designed. You can understand why the building would, you know, the city would want to protect them and not allow developers to put up brand new buildings. They want to protect the building's heritage, especially because it's a government city as well. So historical buildings with Ontario Heritage designation are government protected and cannot be torn down and developed on. Restrictions even apply to property lots and buildings located near historical buildings. So for instance, you can't be blocking the view with your building of a historical building and things like that. So what this means is that, just to give you a sense of the scope of this, how much of a barrier entry, that Kingston has 1,211 registered historical properties protected under the Ontario Heritage Act. Okay, so really what that amounts to is successfully developing a high-rise condo in downtown Kingston. It's a lot like a chess game against the city of Kingston and its 1,200 protected buildings that it has as pieces on its chessboard. It's very difficult. Okay, so you know, and here's to give you some details of why that is. So in downtown Kingston, the property lots are very narrow and short, okay? And so to be able to have, you need to be able to build a high-rise building, any building, you know, especially a high-rise, you're going to have a large footprint, fairly large piece of land. So what that entails is that you've got to, so it's very hard to assemble enough adjacent land to build a high-rise condo because there's all these short, you know, lots. You know, so you have to, you know, sort of buy them up when they become available and assemble them like a jigsaw puzzle, and do it all at the same time. You know, plus you also can't have, you know, one of your lots can't be heritage protected, you know, or that risks, you know, killing your project, and you can't infringe upon the nearby heritage buildings in the area for any of the reasons, including the building's height. So, you know, you can see how much of a minefield this is for developers, and is again, it's one of the big reasons that this is the first of its kind in downtown Kingston. So just to give you a sense of the downtown Kingston area, so this is the where my cursor is. That's the location of the building, and so what this is the situation with the historical buildings in the downtown core. So what I've done is I've put on red there, showing the three major arteries. Princess Street, where the Capitol is located, is the equivalent of Yonge Street in downtown Toronto. It's the main artery that goes through the city. Okay, that's one of the reasons it has 98 of 100 walk score. So these three streets here, Princess Street, Brock Street, and John Street, all have large numbers of historical buildings. Okay, and I'm just going to show you here how that affects developer being able to develop, and how tricky it was for Nate to be able to build this building and get the zoning approved and be able to move forward. Okay, so this is the Princess Street view, looking view of the Capitol. Okay, so what you see here is this is all of the buildings, the retail shops that are right along Princess Street right now. You can see that there's, you know, they're all sort of, you know, small 2 to 3 story buildings, and where my cursor is right now is this is the site. One of the pieces of property that Innate actually bought was an historical property. It was originally called the Capitol Movie Theater. It was a 100-year-old theater, the oldest theater in Kingston, and so to be able to develop on this site, Innate had to stick handle around this situation. What they had to do is they had to keep the marquee. And so right where my cursor is, you know how theaters have the big marquee with all the lights and stuff like that? You see them in Toronto, like for instance some of these repertoire theaters like the Review or the Kingsway, you know, in the West End of Toronto. So this marquee that you see right here, one of the requirements was that the building this had to be preserved. Okay, this facade out in the front of the building. So you can imagine how much of a barrier that entry would be to any sort of project, especially a retail business. Like, how could you be a retail business and still keep this facade out front of the building, you know, especially if you're trying to advertise a completely separate business? It doesn't make any sense, right? So this is why this property sat vacant for a long time. So Innate, what they did is that they worked with the situation and actually, you know, called the building the Capitol, incorporated the facade into the building's design itself. Okay, and so another thing that they did is that you notice that the building itself is set back. Okay, it's actually not at the street level. So if you're walking along the Princess Street and you look up, you're not going to see the building right there necessarily. It's set back, so that helps preserve the flow of the building height, which is what the city wants. Okay, so it's actually connected by a tunnel to where it's so this is the entrance to from the Princess Street there of the Capitol, and what this is what Innate Developments has developed as well. This is the corridor between the two streets, between Princess and Queen Street, and then this corridor is also where Innate is offering or adding in 7,000 square feet and 2 levels of commercial building. So it's a mixed-use building. It's both commercial and residential, so that bodes well for the area as well, and for the people living there and its desirability. So this is the tunnel, this is the corridor that's connecting Queen Street to Princess Street, the only of its kind in the area, which is get people walking through there just to be able to move from one street to the other. And so at the end of this corridor is the other end, and you see here this is the podium, and again the podium is kept to a low, you know, consistent with the other buildings in the area. And as you see, you can really see here that the building is in between the two streets. It's actually not on any one, it's actually in between, and then it's connected by this corridor. Okay, so it took some real creative design and architecture to be able to make this work within this context, but they made it work, got the zoning approval, and away we go. So this just shows you how much of a barrier this is, because a lot of developers would just say, you know what, to hell with it. I have to assemble all this land, and I have to, you know, forget it. So so these heritage buildings, I hope I've convinced you, is a major long-term barrier that's kept downtown Kingston's new condo supply very low for decades. Okay, and why this is an emerging market now. There's a PDF brochure describing the Capitol building's amenities available separately from this video series that I don't need to get into. I'm just here to present this from an investment perspective. Okay. So let's talk about downtown Kingston's condo market demand. Okay, so the condo market demand. All right, let's talk about Kingston's population. So Metro Kingston, there's 123,000 people in there. If you talk about Metro plus the surrounding greater Kingston area, we're talking about 160,000 people. Okay, and so really Kingston is the regional capital of southeastern Ontario. It's the region's Toronto. Okay, it's the Toronto of southeastern Ontario. And so let's talk about the employment density in downtown Kingston. Okay, so most of Kingston's largest employers are actually concentrated in the downtown area where the capital is. And in fact, all top of the 8 largest employers in Kingston are actually government. You have to understand, government is a big time there in Kingston. It's 50% of the jobs there are government jobs. So that means it's a very stable economy. Okay. And so obviously these jobs are highly secure, high-paying jobs with great pensions. Okay, and you'll start to see why in a minute. 6 of the 8 Kingston's 8 largest employers, comprising nearly 17,000 workers, are all located within a kilometer and a half of the capital in downtown Kingston. Okay, so, and as you know, people like to be near work so that they don't have the commuting time. So this is a big plus for the Kingston building, for the Capitol building. And so when you look at these, you can see that these are the kinds of jobs that you want government workers, the high-paying ones that aren't going to get cut with budget cuts. Okay, so first of all, Queen's University, part of that government thing, obviously a growing institution. One of the hardest universities to get into in Canada, actually, one of the best universities in Canada. So there's nearly there's over 8,000 workers there, and that's people that work there. That's not the students. Okay. And so also the second is 8,000 workers in the nearby CFB, again, the largest base in Canada, largest military base in Canada. And, military is not going anywhere anytime soon, one of those really secure jobs. And also the hospital, there's several hospitals, the third being 4,000 workers at Kingston General Hospital. It's a kilometer and a half from the capital. Okay, so high-paying jobs. We talk about the school board is nearby at various distances, correctional services, and 2 other hospitals as well, in number 6 and number 8, plus the city of Kingston. So a lot of really good government jobs are right near the capital. So if you add it up, 17,000 from the largest government employers in downtown core area, 19,000 Queen's students living on campus. That means there's 36,000 people minimum working and studying in Kingston's downtown core amongst the total population of 160,000. When I say minimum, that's just the top 8 employers in Kingston. As I said, 50% is government, 50% private sector. Okay, so a lot of people in that downtown core want to be near where they live, near where they work, and this is what the capital is for. Let's talk about the third factor, Kingston's Queen's University in terms of market demand. Queen's is growing. Okay, there you can see the enrollment numbers, steady enrollment growth over time. Okay, so that definitely bodes well, especially when you have an undersupply situation and problems with building new buildings. When there's more population coming in, more enrollment, it means the demand's going up, the supply keeps low. That means prices go up. So Queen's University has announced that it will continue to increase enrollment with approximately 24,000 students in 2016. So you can see that's up from about 19,000 just 5 years ago. So that's a fairly significant jump. Okay. So now let's talk about the hospitals. So 3 downtown Kingston hospitals employ 6,000 health professionals. They're all within a kilometer and a half of the capital, and Queen's being only 0.7 kilometers from the capital. And also, there is definitely some synergies between the Queen's and the capital and these hospitals. Some of these hospitals are teaching facilities for these Queen's students. So therefore, many downtown Kingston doctors also work at Queen's University, making the capital an ideal place for them to live, considering how all these 3 are in a pretty tight triangle together in terms of distances from one another. So here's the other interesting market. To date, this is the Kingston's affluent empty nesters market. So these are people that are retiring or retired, that are downsizing and want to live in something smaller. 50% of the capital's buyers to date have been retirement age end users, and that's a really good indication for overall capital appreciation in long term. So these are people that have been living in the Kingston area and wanting to downsize and have more amenities nearby. You know, you can imagine people living in these surrounding areas and having big pieces of property and no amenities nearby, and they're getting older and they want to have stuff closer by and not have to drive and not have to have a big property to maintain. And so this is why so many people have decided to buy, many empty nesters decide to buy in the capital. Another great thing about them is they have money. You know, they're equity rich. They either, you know, they have owned their house for decades. They will pay more, therefore, because they're retirement, and so that means they're less price sensitive. And so ultimately, that means wealthier people means better capital appreciation for the building. Let's talk about downtown Kingston's very low vacancy rate. So according to CMHC, the downtown Kingston's current vacancy rate is 0.3%. That represents a 37% increase in rental rates in the past 10 years. And so to put that in perspective, compared to Toronto, this is the average rental apartment vacancy rates from 2002 to 2012 to give you a pretty clear indication. And if you look there were no times where, you know, the vacancy rate was, you know, below 0.3%, at or below 0.3%. So you can see that you know, downtown Kingston is very comparable to Toronto for condos. In fact, if you take a look at this map here, this is just the 2015 apartment vacancy rate for Toronto. The average is 1.6%. You don't see any area in there that is less than 0.3%, aside from Orangeville, 0.0%, for whatever reason, very tight market there. But none of these areas are as low as Kingston, as 0.3%. So definitely something to consider. So just a recap of these 4 key ingredients for buying right: lowest purchase price, emerging property market, constant monthly revenue, maximum income. Here's why the capital meets all 4 buying right criteria. Okay, so briefly, so capital's prices start at $239,900 for 1-bedroom units. Again, that's $150,000 to $150,000 less than Toronto. Next, the condo rental vacancy rate is again 0.3%. And again, it's largely because of the 1,211 protected historical buildings. So that proves that the area, because of that low vacancy rate, it's very undersupplied relative to demand. Now, here's a little bit more about emerging markets. So here's 2 key indications in areas on the very cusp of shifting from an early market to an emerging market. The first thing is that the area's very first major condo project gets launched, and then the second is that project sells well in a reasonably short amount of time, demonstrating sufficient market demand. Okay, so you can see that really buying in a condo project on the cusp of the early to emerging market transition, right in that very sweet spot between the two, that transition. That's the very highest investor profitability long term. Okay, that's just before the market starts to figure out and sales start to go up, and that's when prices start actually rapidly rising, when people start to figure out and buying starts up, and then prices starts getting jacked up and so forth. So the capital in downtown Kingston is the very first high-rise building in the condo, very first high-rise condo building in downtown Kingston, and it's currently 50% sold out since its winter 2015 launch. Okay, so it's definitely in that cusp area between early and emerging, and that's why it's a great time to invest in the capital. So third aspect, constant monthly revenue. So for ensuring constant monthly revenue and no vacancies with these properties for investors, Innate Developments has offered investors a turnkey, hands-off, passive condo investment by providing 3 things. Okay, so those 3 things are full tenant management. So what they're offering is a guaranteed tenant for your condo at high guaranteed monthly rental rate for the first year. So they're handling everything to do with the tenant. They also obviously provide everything to do with the property management. That's obviously where your condo fees come in. But they're also offering full furnishings. I understand that the Queen's students typically want furnishings, so they're doing all the unit furnishing selections, delivery, and installation, so that you're attracting those Queen's students, as well as other people who want the furnishings and just need new furnishings for their new place. And lastly, maximum monthly income. So due to the capital's low price and high rental demand, plus the capital's prime triple O location with the 90 out of 100 walk score today, the capital's high monthly rental rates gives it a much better positive monthly cash flow situation. In other words, you're making more money on a monthly basis than new Toronto GTA condos bought during pre-construction, which typically have a break-even or even negative monthly cash flow, where you're actually losing money for for the first several years or longer. Okay, so to get the details on that, well, first the bottom line about the capital. So with the capital being the very first high-rise condo in the heart of downtown Kingston, investors can capitalize on the high demand in this very undersupplied emerging condo market at a great low price. This demand, coupled with the capital's absolutely prime AAA location, bodes well, very well for your unit's long-term appreciation and your overall return on investment. So to get the details on how this is a really well cash-flowing property compared to Toronto, you definitely want to watch the financial analysis for the Capital Condos video. And in that, so we give you detailed, informed projections on the capital's growth as an investment over the full 30-year mortgage term. So you get a real sense of the full life of this investment and what it looks like from 3 different perspectives, okay? What it looks like from the monthly rental income perspective, from your equity accumulation by paying the mortgage debt pay down, and the capital appreciation. So you got a very clear sense of how this investment will perform so that you're not just guessing, you really know. And we've got some very solid numbers to back our projections here as well. So if you'd like any additional information on this project, feel free. Again, my name is Randy McDonald. There's my contact information. Feel free to get in touch with me. And thanks for watching.